He stayed the night because of the storm. I stayed awake because of everything else. The sky opened just after 7. The kind of rain that doesn't start with warning, no drizzle, no breeze. Just sudden, steady weight. The windows blurred. The streets vanished beneath rushing water. And the highway? Shut down completely. The night that followed wasn't planned. But some things don't need to be. My name is Claire. I'm 45. I've been married to Daniel for almost 20 years. We don't have children. Not by neglect or tragedy, just by the slow, quiet erosion of want. Time passed. Choices were made. Life simplified. We filled our days with order. We filled the space with tasks. And eventually, we mistook routine for intimacy. Daniel is good, solid, predictable. We still touch sometimes, still talk, still mean well. But something inside us both has gone silent, and neither of us seems eager to speak first. Alex has known Daniel longer than I have. They met in college. He was the best man at our wedding. He helped us unpack boxes when we bought this house. And then, like most people, he faded into the background of our life. A few visits a year. The occasional bottle of wine over the kitchen table. Group photos. Shared toasts. Nothing else. He and I were never close, but always kind. Which is why it surprised me when I saw his name on Daniel's phone earlier that week. He's got a consult nearby, Daniel had said. Thought we'd have him over. Sure, I said. I didn't ask for details. I didn't ask why now. That evening, Alex arrived just after 6. Same lean frame. Same quiet presence. His hair a little more gray. His smile slower to appear, but still there. He hugged Daniel tightly, shook off his coat, stepped into our home like it hadn't been 4 years since the last time. I set the table. Daniel opened wine. The conversation was easy. Not intimate, just familiar. But then the rain came. Hard, fast, unrelenting. The weather app blinked red. And Daniel, frowning at his phone, said, "They've shut down the freeway. You're not going anywhere tonight." Alex hesitated. I could maybe. You'll stay, Daniel interrupted. Alex looked at me then. Not for permission, but for something else. A gauge. A temperature. And I said it before I could think. Of course. I'll make up the guest room. That's how it started. A guest room we hadn't used in over a year. Pillowcases that still smelled faintly of lavender detergent. A bedspread folded too neatly, like a hotel no one checks into anymore. I moved through the motions. Sheets. Towels. Toothbrush from the hallway drawer. Window cracked an inch for air. I didn't ask myself why my hands shook a little. I told myself it was the storm. Dinner was good. We laughed. The wine helped. Daniel told stories. Alex added to them. And I watched them both, one familiar like the worn arm of a favorite chair, the other strangely unfamiliar in his quiet. He'd changed, not outwardly, but inwardly. Or maybe I had. After we cleared the dishes, Daniel leaned against the counter, his phone buzzing again. Client issue, he sighed. Give me 10 minutes? Take your time, I said. He disappeared down the hall to his office. And Alex stayed in the kitchen with me. Without comment. Without apology. Just stayed. You don't have to, I said, nodding toward the dishes. He shook his head. I want to. And the way he said it? Not light. Not flirtatious. Just, sure. Caught something in me I didn't know was loose. He handed me a plate. Our fingers brushed. A small, quiet contact. The kind that doesn't say anything, but lingers. The rain outside kept beating against the windows like it wanted in. The faucet ran. He rinsed. I dried. We didn't speak. Not until he said, suddenly, "You ever miss anything?" I looked at him. Sorry. You and Daniel. You ever miss who you were before habit set in? I didn't answer. I didn't know how. Not because I didn't understand, but because I understood too well. He didn't wait for a reply. Just passed the next plate. And we moved slower after that. Not deliberate. Just aware. The space between our arms narrowed. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel. Daniel never came back into the kitchen. By the time I turned off the lights, the silence felt like its own guest. I showed Alex the room, pushed open the door, flicked on the lamp. This okay? Better than okay. He set down his bag, turned to face me. I nodded. There are towels in the drawer. Let me know if you need anything else. Thanks again, he said. I smiled. Of course. And then he looked at me. Not long, not invasive. Just, fully. You look different tonight, he said. That stopped me. I turned, slightly. How? He paused. Thought. Like someone who's remembering she's real. I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. There was no script for that. Good night, I whispered. And I left the room. But I didn't close the door all the way. Just let it rest. Half open. Like I wasn't sure whether I wanted something to follow me. Or not. Some nights don't end when they're supposed to. They stretch long after the last dish is dried. The last switch flipped. The last word spoken. They live in the air. In the quiet. In the way your body won't let you forget it's still there. Daniel never came back into the kitchen. Whatever call he took must have dragged on. His office door stayed closed. I didn't ask. I didn't knock. Alex and I stayed by the sink longer than needed. He dried the same glass twice. I wiped the counter slowly, over and over in small circles. Silence had filled the room like steam. We didn't say anything more about what he'd asked me about missing things. But I hadn't forgotten the question. It sat between us, unspoken, like a chair pulled out, waiting to be filled. You always do that, he said quietly. I looked up. Wipe the counter after it's already clean. I smiled faintly. Old habit. He didn't respond. Just watched my hand. You ever think about how small things become permanent? He added. I looked over at him. His face was soft in the low light, half-shadowed. You mean? He shrugged. Like how a routine starts out as convenience, then becomes identity. I didn't answer. Because yes, and because saying it out loud would have made something crack. We moved around each other carefully, not choreographed, but attuned. Two people not touching but aware of every movement. I reached for a dishcloth, and his arm brushed mine. Just once. My pulse didn't jump, but it noticed. I used to think marriage was a fixed thing, he said suddenly. Like stone, like it stayed the shape you poured it into. I said nothing. He turned the dish in his hand slowly, water trailing down his wrist. But it isn't, is it? No, I said softly. It isn't. There was nothing suggestive in his voice. No edge. No lean. But the space around us felt heavier than it had a moment ago. Thicker. Wider. He passed me the last plate. When our fingers met, neither of us moved. Not at once. Just a pause. Not long enough to call intention. But not brief enough to be dismissed. We let go at the same time. I turned off the tap. The silence rang. Outside, the storm had slowed. No longer pounding, just tapping. The kind of sound that makes you think someone's at the door even when they're not. I looked at the clock. Nearly midnight. You tired? I asked. He shook his head. Not really. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, face unreadable. You. I shook mine too. Daniel's footsteps never returned. No creak in the floorboards. No voice calling from the hall. Just the hush of a house in deep pause. You want tea? I asked. He smiled, small, genuine. That'd be good. I filled the kettle. The stove hissed to life. Neither of us moved toward the table. We stayed near the sink, near the doorway. Between rooms. Between things. The tea was strong and dark. No sugar. No milk. We didn't sit. We sipped. Standing. Side by side. Like we were waiting for something to decide itself. He spoke again, softer this time. You ever feel like you're still the same person, but quieter? I nodded before he finished. Like you folded yourself in, I said. Yes, he breathed. Exactly. We stood there, holding heat in our hands, the rain thinning into rhythm. The house felt different now. Fuller. And I knew it wasn't about attraction. It wasn't about want. It was about being seen. At one point, he turned his head toward me, just slightly. His gaze not on my face, but somewhere just beside it. Like he could feel what I wasn't saying. You don't talk much around him, he said. I blinked. Daniel? He nodded. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I think I forgot how, I whispered. He didn't pity me. Didn't rush in with comfort. He just nodded. And that made it easier to breathe. We finished our tea. He rinsed the mugs, dried them both. I didn't stop him, didn't thank him. There was nothing to thank. The space between our bodies never narrowed beyond what was reasonable. But something else had. The space between being polite and being present. I walked toward the hallway first. He followed. We didn't speak. The house felt dim and honest, like it wasn't hiding anything anymore. When I reached the guest room, I opened the door and stepped aside. He passed me slowly. This okay? I asked, even though I knew it was. He looked around. Better than okay. He placed his bag down, turned to face me. Thanks again, he said. I nodded. Of course. Then the pause. He looked at me, just like before. Not long, not hard, just enough. You look different tonight, he said again. I didn't flinch this time. How? I asked. Like someone remembering she's real. I could have laughed. Could have brushed it off. Could have said something clever, something safe. But I didn't. I just stood there. Good night, I whispered. He nodded. Night, Claire. And I turned. Walked to my room. But I didn't close the door. Not all the way. Just enough to keep the air moving between us. Just enough to say, I'm still here. Some doors creak when you open them. Some when you close them. But that night, mine didn't make a sound. Just the soft hush of air moving like breath. Like something alive slipping from one room into another. I left it slightly ajar. A fraction. Just wide enough for air. Or memory. I stepped into the bedroom. Familiar, quiet, unchanged. The covers were still turned down. My glass of water untouched. The bedside lamp casting its usual soft amber glow. I didn't turn it off. I didn't get in bed. I stood in the middle of the room, barefoot, arms crossed, unsure whether I'd come in to rest or to think. The house was quiet. Not empty. Full. And that fullness didn't feel like a person. It felt like possibility. I sat on the edge of the bed. My body felt tired, but not enough to surrender. My mind, even less. I listened. For footsteps. For breath. For the creak of the guest bed frame. But there was nothing. Silence, weighted and aware. Across the hallway, his door had closed softly behind me. But I kept thinking about what he'd said. You look different tonight. Like someone remembering she's real. He hadn't said it with affection. He said it with recognition. Like he'd seen something and decided to name it. Without expectation, without claim. That made it worse. Because it meant he saw me for no one else's benefit. Not even his own. Just me. I slid beneath the sheets. pulled the blanket up, closed my eyes, tried to drift. But the sleep never came. Instead, I imagined him. Not his face, not his body, but his stillness, the calm in the way he listened, the steadiness in the way he stood beside me at the sink. Not searching, not asking, just present. I rolled onto my side, then my back, then my side again. The house creaked. The heater buzzed on. The wind pressed softly against the windows. But beneath it all, the silence between two closed doors. Except mine wasn't closed. Not really. And I kept thinking. Not about what hadn't happened, but what had. The brush of his fingers as we passed the glass. The way he'd stood still after I said goodnight. The weight in his pause before he spoke. None of it was flirtation. It wasn't seduction. It wasn't even confusion. It was contact. Simple, clean, and devastating. I tried not to replay it, but I did. Tried not to wonder if he was lying awake too, but I did. Not with longing, with recognition. There are so many kinds of distance. The kind between cities, the kind between rooms, and the kind that lives inside a marriage. And sometimes, the smallest step towards someone else doesn't feel like betrayal. It feels like a return to yourself, to a pulse you thought you buried under folded towels and polite nods and half kisses at the door. That night, I didn't imagine touching him or being touched. I imagined being remembered, not by someone else, by myself. I lay in bed for hours unmoving, eyes open, watching shadows move slowly across the ceiling. And I didn't sleep, not even for a moment, because something inside me had finally woken. And I was afraid that if I closed my eyes, it might slip back into silence. There's a kind of night that doesn't end. It just dissolves slowly, imperceptibly, into a morning you never asked for. A morning that doesn't greet, just arrives. As if to confirm that time kept moving, even if you didn't. I hadn't slept. I wasn't tired. I was altered. Subtly. Quietly. In a way I couldn't name, but couldn't unfeel either. The ceiling had kept me company. Its faint, shifting shadows. The dull glow of the hallway light leaking through the crack in my door. I didn't toss. I didn't turn. I just lay there still, but wide awake, breathing evenly, listening for nothing in particular, and hearing everything. I heard the silence of a closed guest room door, the wind brushing the eaves, the soft hum of the fridge, steady, oblivious. And beneath all that, something quieter still, a presence that wasn't quite presence anymore, something that lingered. Not him, but the imprint of being noticed. Eventually, light began to creep in. Not golden, not gentle, just gray. Faded and overcast, like a bedsheet someone had forgotten to dry properly. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and stared out the window. The trees swayed. The rain had stopped, but its memory remained. Droplets clung to the glass, forming slow trails like fingerprints on skin. I sat up. My back ached slightly from lying too still. My feet touched the floor, cool and grounding. I wrapped my robe tighter around me, not from cold, but from instinct. And I walked toward the hallway like someone stepping into a memory they hadn't lived yet. His door was open. That simple. Just open. No sign of him inside. The bed made neatly. The blanket smoothed. Pillow centered. Too precise. Too intentional. I stepped in without thinking. The room smelled like nothing now. Like clean sheets and ceiling fan. Like vacancy. I stared at the bed for a long time. And it stared back. I don't know what I was looking for. Evidence, maybe. A wrinkle in the sheets. A glass on the nightstand. A message written in breath on the window. But there was nothing. He had left the room the way you leave a hotel. Careful. Polite. as if erasing all signs he'd ever been there was a kind of respect. And maybe it was, but it also felt like erasure. Not of guilt, of presence. In the kitchen, the stillness deepened. No kettle on the stove. No shoes by the door. No coat draped on a chair. Only the faint scent of citrus and soap. And then, there it was. A note. Folded once, weighted under the corner of the fruit bowl. No envelope. No drama. Just paper. Just words. I unfolded it slowly, my fingers colder than I'd realized. Thanks again. For everything. I hope you stay warm. Alex. No flourish. No Claire. No clue if the last sentence meant more than it said. Just warmth. Written with distance. I stared at the handwriting. It wasn't careful, but it wasn't rushed. It felt measured. And I think that hurt more than if it had been sloppy, because it meant he'd taken his time. I didn't cry, didn't blink too hard. I just stood there, holding paper that had weight but no mass. Words that said nothing and yet said exactly enough. Daniel came down just after 9. His voice carried from the top of the stairs, cheerful, unaware, untouched. He rubbed sleep from his eyes, walked into the kitchen in socks and a t-shirt. He kissed my cheek the way he always did while I poured his coffee. Did the storm keep you up? I nodded. Thought so. It was brutal last night. He yawned, reached for cereal. How'd Alex sleep? He left early, I said. Didn't say much. Daniel didn't press. He poured milk into his bowl, sat at the table and scrolled through his phone. Talked about an article he read. Laughed to himself. I sipped tea that had gone cold. And I smiled when I needed to. I watched him like I was watching a scene I knew by heart. Not with disdain. Just with distance. The kind that comes not from betrayal, but from realization. From knowing that something in me had reappeared. And I hadn't even known it was missing. After breakfast, he left to run errands. I stayed behind, cleaned the kitchen, washed dishes that didn't need washing, wiped the counters again. And then I found myself holding the note. Again. This time, not to read it, just to feel it. Just to remember that something had happened quietly, briefly, without a word. But it had happened, and it had mattered. I placed it in the drawer next to the phone chargers and old receipts. Not to hide it, but not to display it either. Because it wasn't a secret. It was a reminder that I was still here. That afternoon, I sat on the couch and looked out the window. The rain had left. The wind was quieter. The trees swayed softer. I wasn't waiting for anything, but I wasn't drifting anymore either. I was present, and that's what had changed. Not because of him, but because of the way he looked at me. Not hungrily, not longingly, just clearly. And I hadn't realized how much I missed that. How much I missed being a reflection of myself in someone's eyes, instead of a role, a rhythm, a function. That night, Daniel made dinner. He told me about a new restaurant opening. Asked if we should try it. Suggested a movie. I nodded, laughed at the right moments. But somewhere in me, something remained untouched. Not because I was withholding, but because I was listening closely now to a voice inside me that had been speaking all along, and I had been ignoring it. Later, I stood by the front door, not to open it, not to check the lock, just to be near it, to remember the night before, the way the house had held its breath, the way silence had meant presence, not absence. The way a man had stood next to me in a kitchen, saying almost nothing, and yet returning me to myself. I didn't dream that night. I stayed awake again. But this time not because I was unsettled. Because I wasn't ready to close the space. Because something had woken. And I wasn't done feeling it yet.